Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Source Material, episode 232. We're coming back at you here. It's me, Jesse Starcher, and the patriarch, Mark Radulich. Tonight, we're going to be talking some Cloak and Dagger. We've talked about them before. I'm going to pull up my notes here real quick. Mark, Cloak and Dagger, what is the name of this book? Is this Shades of Grey? Is that what it's called?
Shades of Grey. This is the 2018, I believe, iteration. It was only 6 issues long. The story is Shades of Grey. When it was released as a trade paperback, it was called Shades of Grey.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, 2000, you said 2018. That's a pretty recent comic book. I know we have Dennis Hopeless, who is the writer of this book, and pencils by David Mussina, Elisabetta D'Amico as the inker, and Giada Marchisio as the colorist. A lot of Italian stuff going on there, it seems like. So anyway, Cloak and Dagger, we're revisiting Cloak and Dagger here, Mark. And there's a reason. Did you give us the reason why we're doing this book yet?
Yes, because we are later in the week, we'll be reviewing Cloak and Dagger Season 2 on Freeform.
All right. And you said it's a weird season, huh?
It's a weird show, man. Lately, we've been dealing a lot in weird shows. Last week was Doom Patrol. This week is Cloak and Dagger. When you get off the yellow brick road that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you get into some of these television shows, they just go all kinds of fuck it.
Oh, yeah. They don't care where they go. Okay, well, let me go ahead. We'll get into the synopsis. Cloak and Dagger, two heroes that have been at each other's side since day one, eventually finding love. But now things have changed. Ty and Tandy's relationship has ended, with each going their own way, only briefly reuniting when Cloak must use Dagger's powers to satiate the dark force that consumes him. Tandy now works with the police to lend her powers in order to obtain criminals, while Cloak is part of a celebrity security force. But it's when a local criminal is found dead, Tandy begins to think that it is connected to a string of deaths that all left a withered gray husk, a telltale sign of Cloak's dark force used to a murderous potential. However, as the story progresses, we learn that the one responsible for the deaths is a friend from Cloak and Dagger's past, a guy by the name of Gray, who has powers of his own to influence those to do his will by wrapping them in a fog that causes them to see their own version of a satisfying reality. Can Cloak and Dagger set aside their differences to face Gray and end his vile ways for good? You'll get your answers here in Cloak and Dagger, Shades of Grey. So, all right, Mark. I mean, I guess first off, what you think of the story, man? We've got 6 issues here.
I like the simple stuff, man. I mean, I know that we sometimes deal in very esoteric, very overly epic, crazy stuff here. I know people didn't love this. I think, they just want Cloak and Dagger to be together, fighting drug dealers. Like, they don't want any animosity between the two. And I'm like, no, man, give me some grist for the mill. Give me some angst. And this 2000 iteration, this 6-issue limited series called Shades of Grey, I actually thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Editor Devin Lewis talks about how this was released the day before the first season released of Cloak and Dagger on Freeform. I also hopped in there to take a look at, I think it's at the end, we have a letters page there that's by Dennis Hopeless, and I think also by the artist David Mussina. So Dennis talks about how there's a couple things that you always saw in Cloak and Dagger books, and that was the two of them together. So he thought, what happens if we decide to break them up? What can we do with them then? Which I thought was an interesting take, because we're used to them being together. As a matter of fact, they had a relationship at one point. If you watch the show, you see that in there as well. They have a relationship, but now they're no longer together. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it added a good dynamic to the book?
Yeah, because I remember when we did this the first time with Cloak and Dagger, and they actually talk about this. One of the nice things about this book is that it builds on the previous relationship. It isn't just, they just didn't throw it like an Elseworld story. This builds on their relationship going all the way back to the limited series that we did during the first season of Cloak and Dagger, where she's like a teenage girl, very different in these early iterations. He's more like stoic, more otherworldly. Like here, he just seems like a kid.
Yeah.
And she's consulting for the LAPD. He's doing like bodyguard duty. It's like this definitely feels like if this were like Cloak and Dagger the movie, this is the sequel. They're like down on their luck and they gotta like build themselves back up again. They've gone their separate ways, and this is what I was getting to, because she, as a teenage girl, was overly dependent on the protective Cloak.
Mm-hmm.
Now that she's starting to grow up, she's starting to She's starting to find her voice, find her legs, find her independence. She's starting to find her wokeness. She's finding her Me Too. She's finding it all. All the things. She is woman. Hear her throw light daggers.
Indeed.
And so what I'm making, I'm being silly like I normally am. If you've heard this show before, I'm very sarcastic. But I don't want to take anything away from where she comes. She's really evolved as a character. So where we meet her here, she's like, I'm an independent woman living in the world. I don't want this literal cloak around me, protecting me from all the things. I want to experience life and all of its slings and arrows. And just as this is happening, and Cloak is kind of like, well, this isn't the life I imagined for myself. This isn't what I want, especially because I'll die if she doesn't give me the light, which is another element of their relationship. He literally feeds off of her. They'll still get together occasionally so that she can give him the light so that he doesn't go crazy and die. But that's really the extent of their relationship right now. And what brings them back together is this guy from their past who I think, correct me if I'm wrong, she thinks Cloak killed him once already.
When she first finds the withered husks that are laying around,
she thinks it's Cloak.
Yeah, she immediately starts thinking it's Cloak because they had that friend from back then who he enveloped in his cloak, and they thought he accidentally killed him. And he became this, gray withered husk laying there without life. But of course, like you said, we find out that he's not dead.
So we have like a sins of the past kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like she thinks Cloak killed this guy, and so he's back and he's out for revenge, and he's playing upon the distance in their relationship. He's playing on all of these unresolved feelings between the two characters, and he's using it to his advantage to exact his revenge. It's a very simple story. It's a very straightforward story, but I thought it was very enjoyable, and I thought this was very adaptable. If there's going to be a third season of this, I wouldn't mind seeing this adapted as into a third season of Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I think what had happened is there was a fight, and I think Cloak had saw where Gray was using his powers back then to kind of manipulate Dagger. He had saw this. They get into a fight. Gray ends up using his powers on him, but like immediately after, Cloak uses his powers on the Gray. So they all think Gray's dead. She wakes up after being fogged, which is that's the name of the power that Gray has. He can fog people into seeing this reality. So she wakes up from this fog that he was using on her and sees Gray laying there and sees Cloak just fogged out of his mind. His eyes rolled in the back of his head. So she has no idea what happens. The only thing she knows is that Cloak, as Cloak wakes up, they think that he's dead. So yeah, his thing is he's bided all this time, and now it's time to go get revenge, and therefore he's going around and making Tandy believe that Cloak was doing that. Of course, by the end of issue 2, she figures it out that that's not the case. What do you think of Cloak here? I think one of the neat things about Cloak was that even though they've gone their separate ways, he's still attached. He's still kind of like stalking her in the shadows and stuff.
He's definitely the boyfriend that isn't quite over the breakup. I like that he's a real person in this series and not the way that he's presented in the Cloak and Dagger we did last year, where he was just
almost like a monster. I mean, he wasn't really, he was still human, but you could tell that he rarely, if I remember right, it was like he rarely said things that just didn't come off like he was being severely influenced by this dark force.
Yeah, he was a more relatable human being, I think, in this iteration of the story of the comic, as opposed to what he's like when they originally presented Cloak and Dagger, where he didn't talk in any way that was realistic. He was way too comic booky in the beginning. It was the overlong dialogue. It was these elaborate speeches about darkness and light, good and evil. Whereas this, he's just a dude whose heart got broken by the hot blonde, and he's trying to figure some shit out. And he's moved on. He's got this other girl, but he obviously still has a thing for her. And it's complicated by the fact that if she doesn't feed him light, he'll die. And then they have further complications of he's lost control of his powers before, and so she thinks that's happening again, and he's killing people. And Christ Almighty, she's trying to work with the police, and she doesn't want to send her friend to jail. And so for a simple story, there's a lot of layers to it. I like stuff about relationships. look, I like a good explosion as much as the next person, but I like stuff that gets really into the meat of how two human beings deal with one another. And I don't necessarily mean it has to be man and woman, or it has to be romantic. It happens to be both of those things in this case. But I mean, there's all of these elements about her, and this I think pissed off the loyal readership of Cloak and Dagger, but fuck those people. I like the fact that she's trying to be her own person. I also like how Fogg kept messing with her. Like, there was the perfect mom type thing where she knows that's horseshit. So then it was just like, oh, you're an Avenger. And she's like, no, I'm not one of them either. So I like the way she was very assertive, she was very 2018, very 2019, very female forward in this, which I liked, without being overbearing. Like, some people would be like, oh, this is preachy. I didn't feel like this was preachy. I feel like this is what happens when you have a single woman trying to establish her own identity separate from someone who used to be her partner, and then her partner, who very much his identity was that partnership, and trying to redefine himself. Mm-hmm. And then they're forced together to deal with this enemy that's targeting both of them, and they have to kind of figure things out on the fly, and they take their lumps, but they figure it out, and they get over it, and they beat the bad guy in the end. I'm like, wow, this was wrapped up pretty perfectly.
One of the things that I found interesting, there's a couple favorite parts that I have in this book. I love how, like, Dagger gets abducted by the Grey, and I think like near a month passes, almost like 3 weeks pass, and Cloak is like trying to figure out how in the hell, he has no idea where she went. And then that celebrity shows up, which I think his name is Happy Hour. Happy Hour shows up and he's like, okay, dude, what's going on? And he's like, well, I've got to find my girlfriend. And he's like, all right, I got you. And he proceeds to go onto Instagram, puts a post on there, and then like describes what the Grey looks like. And then within seconds, they know exactly where he's at, because all these people that follow him on Instagram and whatever are basically, doing the search job for him. So they immediately find out where he's at. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Very topical.
Yes. And one thing we got to remember, and this is set out, Cloak puts this out there right in the first issue. He talks about how they're not heroes. Cloak and Dagger are not heroes, which, they've got these powers, and they've used them to help other heroes in the past. But, at the outset of this issue, Cloak is like, we're not heroes. We're they're just runaways. They've been runaways for a long time. And all they really want to do is just kind of live a normal life. That's what they've now set out to do apart from each other. Cloak goes and gets a job working for a security force, for a celebrity. Then we have Dagger, who's working for the cops, working with the cops. I think that one guy refers to her as detective at some point. So she's got a job. So they're just trying to find their spot in the world. Of course, no matter what happens, usually they're Cloak and Dagger. Some villain's going to show up, and we got an iteration, or we got a villain here that I don't know if I've ever read in Marvel Comics, and that was a Scarecrow. He shows up for a couple issues. What did you think of that? Did that take you for a surprise? Like, wait a second, what the fuck, Scarecrow?
No, I mean, he wasn't in it enough. I think that's something that's better represented on screen than in the comic book, because he's in there for like a couple of panels and it's dealt with, and it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I've not seen the Marvel version of the Scarecrow. I don't think I've read anything with the Marvel version of Scarecrow in it. What do you think of the villain, I guess? Give me your thoughts on the Grey.
It's nice to see a villain that isn't bent on taking over the world. No baby Darkseid, no splitting the space-time continuum. There was no MacGuffin. It was a revenge tale. Mm-hmm. I want revenge on the two of you. I know you personally. I know where to hit you. I know your emotional weak points, and I'm going to take advantage of them. He's another one where he's using hallucinations and dream states to take advantage of people, which is pretty easy to do in terms of representation, whether in a comic book or a TV show or a movie. So it was fine. I thought he was appropriately menacing. That he would act as a sort of novel, sort of toothless hallucination, and then she'd figure it out, and he'd immediately turn like into a demon face.
He did have a scary face at one point. His like jaw like unhinged almost, and zombie looking vampire dude.
Like, if Freeform / ABC decide that they're gonna continue with Cloak and Dagger, like it's doing just well enough as an anchor show to get people to pay attention to Freeform, or it's getting good watches on Hulu. that they decide to do a third season. I could definitely see them looking at this going, because considering, and we'll talk about this on Thursday, considering where they left season 2, this is actually not a bad place to go.
So at the very end, Cloak and Dagger are back together again, or at least so it seems.
Yeah, he moves in with her.
He moves in with her, and you're like, oh, okay, well, they've patched things up. They're back together, but that's not the case. The detective that it seemed like they had a thing going on between Dagger and detective.
They had a Sam and Diane, will they, won't they?
Yeah, Heidi Kea, or what the hell ever his name was, Ikeda.
There's a little bit of sexual tension.
Yeah,
there's a seed there that with some sunlight and some flour and some vitamins, it can grow into a flower. If you'll remember, they're together, but they're together out of necessity, and they're just sort of over themselves. They realize that they're better together than apart, but they're not in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in a romantic relationship, I should say. Their relationship is platonic.
And you're speaking about Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of it is also out of necessity. A lot of her powers were drained. What little she has to give to him or he'll die. So it's like, well, out of necessity, and because they're sort of over the hump of, will you just leave me alone? They kind of resolve that. They're living together, but they're roomies.
It's just a roommate situation.
Yeah, they're not. It's kind of, let us be friends, but let us be separate people. Mm-hmm. Not a single entity. Cloak and Dagger, no spaces.
Yeah.
And so he comes knocking at the door, and of course, Eddie Izzard tells us coffee isn't just coffee, Jesse Starcher.
Oh, okay.
Coffee means shagging.
Oh, all right.
So if I ever knock on your door and I brought you a cup of coffee, shagging's afoot.
Well, I'll be prepared.
I like my coffee the way I like my women, in a plastic cup. I love Eddie Izzard.
Good stuff. The final couple panels here. I mean, Cloak does not look happy, but he says, as Dagger leaves, he just kind of looks up from his cup of coffee and says, "She's alive and well. We're both still kicking. It is what it is." So,
well, that's what I was talking about. Like, Cloak brought her coffee. It's like, look, see, I'm a good dude. I brought you coffee. Shagging's afoot, yeah. And then she gets the door, and IKEA brought her better coffee.
Oh, I mean, what final thoughts, Mark? You already said you enjoyed it. You had a good time. Breezy read, right?
Oh yeah, super breezy read. Not crazy about the artwork. I'm not gonna lie. Artwork seems a little juvenile, a little elementary,
Yeah, come on, man. It's comics, dude.
It's not quite Sam Keith, but
they're fucking put that on the bingo card.
That is a source material exclusive when I make fun of Sam Keith.
Yes, sir. Bonus $20.
I mean, you're right. This is average comic book art.
I was okay. Art never took you out of it, though. You weren't like, oh my gosh.
No. Okay. No, this isn't like Sam Keith, where I'm like, I don't even want to read this anymore.
Okay, well, I guess that brings our discussion of Cloak and Dagger: Shades of Grey to a close. Unless you have any other burning desires, we can go ahead and get into plugs.
Yeah, we really bookended this group, right? Like we did their first solo series, and we did their last solo series.
Yeah, that's true.
So if there's a season 3, I don't know what we're gonna do next. Something in the middle, I suppose.
I'm sure there's something out there. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that they've been in that I've like.
Cloak and Dagger's never been like a super popular. It's always been like one of those like sort of niche. Like you're a big time comic book reader and it appealed to you, but like you're like 1 out of 20 people reading it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, there's. I know they showed up in the 90s, late 80s. They had their own series in the late 80s, and I think I've collected like maybe the first 5 of those issues, but they never really struck out and had their own series a whole lot. Usually they were, guest appearance. Hey, Cloak and Dagger's in this issue of Spider-Man. Cloak and Dagger's in this issue of Alpha Flight.
Cloak and Dagger's in this issue of the Runaways.
There you go. That's kind of what they do. They're the bit players, the B guys that kind of hang out in the background and then make their appearance every once in a while.
So I'm looking at their Wikipedia page. Cloak and Dagger, Crime and Punishment, collected the first appearances in like the Spectacular Spider-Man, Marvel Team Up. Cloak and Dagger, Child of Darkness, Child of Light was the 1983 1-4.
There is a Marvel graphic novel, Cloak and Dagger and Power Pack, Shelter from the Storm. Mm-hmm. Now, have you ever heard of the OGNs? The OGNs from Marvel came out in like the 80s.
No.
Okay.
Hang on. Before you tell me about this, we did the 1985 1-11. What a slog that was.
Yeah.
Cloak and Dagger Lost and Found.
My favorite part was them fucking around with the Beyonder and the Beyonder getting high on heroin.
Oh, yeah. That was great. So we have Cloak and Dagger, Predator, and Prey trade paperback, which is a collection of Strange Tales issues, the Predator and Prey graphic novel from 1982, the one you just mentioned with them in Power Pack, and Mutant Misadventures of Cloak and Dagger, which is a 1 through 4 issue limited series, which is 1988. There's Cloak and Dagger, Runaways and Reversals trade paperback, which is a collection of Runaways, Cloak and Dagger 2010, Spider Island Cloak and Dagger, just like a bunch of different shit here.
Yeah, I was going to say that's I'm looking at it right here. The Strange Tales, amazing. So it must be all a bunch of like one-off stories with the Runaways and Cloak and Dagger involved. I have no idea what's good and what's not. So
yeah, this was definitely like me just kind of flipping through with Amazon when I was working and bored and trying to figure out like what we're going to talk about next time. So, which is what I'll do again. I'll come up with something that seems to be self-contained and we'll figure it out.
Have you ever read anything with the Power Pack in it?
Maybe I've read some Power Pack back when when that was a thing, but it's been a long time. I know Power Pack turned up in other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's like 4 Kids, and Franklin Richards, I believe, was one of them. But anyway, yeah. All right, well, we'll figure something out. I guess that brings our discussion of Cloak and Dagger Shades of Grey to a close. Mark Radulich, let's talk the schedule, sir. What do we have upcoming on the Radulich in Broadcasting Network?
Last week was Doom Patrol Brick by Brick, where Chris Sheehan took 97 hours to tell you about the history of Doom Patrol. Did you like my explanation, though, for why we didn't read the iteration we should have done, which was the Grant Morrison one? Because it seems too smart and wordy for me. I'm a dumbbell.
Perfect.
Last week we reviewed Crawl on Damn You Hollywood. We reviewed the Texas Hippie Coalition. Jesse and I talked Doom Patrol. What a show. And there was even some boxing coverage. Plant versus Lee on Fox. While everyone else might have been watching Keith Thurman versus Manny Pacquiao, fuck that noise. We're going to watch the free show on Fox, and we gave you some alternate commentary. Tomorrow on Damn You Hollywood is our review of The Lion King remake, the photorealistic CGI Lion King that the critics have decided they can't take no more Disney remakes and they're going to burn the studio down. We've got Robert Winfrey on for Sabaton, The Great War. And this Thursday, coming up on TV Party Tonight, is Cloak and Dagger, as we mentioned before, Season 2, with Mayhem, and I can't remember the other guy's name. We'll talk about it, though.
All right. Yeah, I've got to get caught up on that.
Yeah, next week, we've got DC Hanna-Barbera 3. I will be talking about Huckleberry Hound, Green Lantern. Alexis will talk about Deathstroke, Yogi Bear. If we can find Ronnie somewhere in a bunker deep underground, he will be talking Nightwing, Magilla Gorilla, and then Jesse got stuck with Superman and Top Cat. No. Will we have a judge for this? We don't know just yet. We'll have to figure it out. On Damn You Hollywood, well, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if she could. L7 Rats, Scatter the Rats on Metal Hammer of Doom, and then we decided to call an audible because Pulp Fiction is largely perfect and not prosecutable. Instead, we're going to do a much more divisive film. One of My Babies. I'm going to kill one of my babies and prosecute it, even though I love it. Jackie Brown. You ever see Jackie Brown, Jesse?
No, I've never seen Jackie Brown.
Oh. And also check out in the archives our pair of wrestling shows we did. We did one for AEW and Evolve and one for Extreme Rules. We did a bunch of Spider-Man shows the week before that. And Jesse. Hey, Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
Pat and I did a commentary for Iron Eagle.
Oh, really now?
Yeah.
I do recall seeing that pop up on the old feed there. Did you have a good time?
We did. You and I still need to, and Chris Bailey need to talk about Moonwalker, the video game.
Yes, indeed. Oh, we don't have enough video game commentaries on here.
No, we need to do more. All right, I'm out of plugs.
I'm ready to go to bed, Mark. Let's get the hell out of here. It's Cloak and Dagger. I'm Jesse Starcher. That's Mark Radulich. We will catch you next Monday. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Source Material, episode 2000.
Start again.
episode 200.
No, start again.
Over again. Like the wizard. The wizard.
You figured me out.
Anyway, IKEA, the Swedish Asian dude, Eskimo guy, Eskimo detective.
As Eddie Izzard would say, if the Prime Minister of Burundi offers you a cup of coffee, he's not trying to fuck you. I want people who are like genuine wrestling fans to kill themselves because of Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, well, they're almost on the verge, I think. They're coming close anyway.
The tears of pure wrestling fans are delicious, and they keep me full.
With Detective Eskimo, IKEA, Sweden, meatballs.
Detective Meatballs. Because his penis is bigger. Get it?
Oh boy.
Better coffee, bigger penis. That's the correlation. All right. So if you've got all the squares now, that should be Rattledge Broadcasting. Bingo. Eddie Izzard, penis joke, wrestling
reference. Yep, for sure.
If we hit them all.
Tic-tac-toe.
Did we even make it an hour?
No.
I don't even think you have enough for a gag reel.
I'll figure something out. It'll just be like you saying something and then a fart sound and then, Alexis is in there with us, right?
She's doing Deathstroke Yogi Bear.
Did you just say that?
I did.
Ugh.
You're going to need to fix that in editing now.
I'm going to go to sleep.
They literally seem to have fucked out of boredom.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Oh, all right. Well, let me yawn real quick.
You're going to need to fix that in editing.
No, it goes right into the gag reel.
You should do an entire gag reel of just you yawning.
Have I ever told you? I haven't told you. I have an cut. I have an cut just waiting to be released.
And then, but then we're with,
so, where,
and
yeah, have you,
maybe, the doctor had to play with my butt last week.
So, Patsy, why do I want to say Patsy Cline? Patsy Walker. Man.
Wow, that was ridiculous.
Yeah.